They humiliated the cowboy for saving a virgin. At dawn, 200 knights applauded him on the road. Luke Callahan felt noonday Texas sun gnaw at the back of his neck, the brim of his sweat-creased Stetson clamped between raw knuckles. Dust hung in Dry Creek Square like gun smoke after a duel, turning every face around him into a blurred smear of judgment. He tasted iron, whether from the dried blood on his split lip or from the rage he kept chained, he wasn't sure. Sheriff Eli Collins pushed forward, spurs clinking, badge catching a stripe of light. "You laid hands on respectable men, Callahan," he barked. "This town calls that sin, not heroics." Luke's eyes stayed fixed on the church steps, where Adelaide Grant sat like a porcelain statue in a sky-blue dress, braid glinting gold. She scarcely blinked, yet he felt her gaze pierce the mob's din, tethering him to calm he didn't deserve. Old widow Martha Loomis jabbed her cane, freckles of egg yolk dotting her shawl. He dragged that poor girl's name through gutter mud, alone with a drifter before sunrise. Shame! Cheers rose. A boy barely 16 hefted a stone the size of a peach pit. Luke's mind flickered back 2 hours. 3 whiskey-stinking drifters, knives glinting behind Neil's mercantile. Adelaide's whisper-thin scream. He'd fought like a cornered wolf, fists cracking cartilage, boots crunching gravel. Honor had demanded it, honor that now threatened to scalp him. Mayor Russ Baxter waddled atop the boardwalk, red as a stove coil. Dry Creek cannot abide scandal. Sheriff, see him gone by sundown, 1 hour hence. If he lingers, we string him up like a horse thief. A hush sliced the square. Luke heard only his heart thrumming like Apache drums. He straightened, wiping egg off his shirt. "Those men meant her harm," he said, voice gravel low. "I'd do it again." Reverend Jonas Whitaker lifted a Bible that seemed suddenly heavy. "Violence begets rumor, son. Reputation is a maiden's shield. Yours has shattered hers." Laughter, cruel, brittle, rippled among townsfolk. The boy hurled his stone. It clipped Luke's shoulder and thudded into dirt. A chorus of hoots followed, but in the gap Luke caught Adelaide's expression. Not fear, not shame. Something coiled, calculating. Her fingers brushed the silver locket at her throat as though it housed gunpowder instead of a keepsake. Collins untied Luke's revolver, handing it to the mayor for show. "Saddle up," the sheriff growled. "Ride north till Dry Creek's dust is a memory. Cross back, and you'll meet a rope." Wind hissed through cottonwoods. A church bell somewhere tolled the half-hour. Countdown started. Luke tipped his hat to Adelaide, then slid it over sunburned curls. When he turned, rotten eggs splattered against the church wall behind him, sliding like yellow tears. As the crowd dispersed to whisper triumph, Adelaide rose, smoothing her skirt with steadier hands than any soldier. Her lips curved, just a breath of a smile, while her eyes tracked Luke's departing figure. Nobody else noticed the locket snap open, nor the tiny folded telegram she slipped inside before closing it with a click like a cocked hammer. Luke Callahan stepped into the Rattler Saloon, a rancid hush following him like a shadow. One hand Frank lurked behind the counter, polishing a chipped glass with the same rag he used on flies. "Back corner, cowboy," he muttered. "Double price today. Reputation tax." Luke slapped 2 silver coins on the bar, then took the darkest booth, facing the street. With each swallow, the whiskey bit his tongue, but the burn felt cleaner than the words he'd heard outside. Through the grime-caked window, he watched Sheriff Collins marshal a posse. 5 townsmen, rifles gleaming, horses half-saddled. They laughed too loud, flaunting victory before it was won. Beyond them, Adelaide Grant stood near the church fence, speaking soft and urgent to telegrapher Silas Grover. Her gloved hand pressed a folded slip of paper into Grover's palm. Her eyes held the kind of promise that could raise cities. Luke's attention snapped back when Mayor Baxter lumbered through the saloon doors, flanked by Reverend Whitaker. "Cowboy," the mayor called, loud enough for every patron to hear. "You've got 40 minutes left." Whitaker lifted his Bible like a warrant. "Use the time to pray, son. You'll need grace out past the county line." Luke answered with silence, knuckles whitening around the whiskey glass. Outside, dust devils swirled down Main Street, rattling shutters as if foretelling hoofbeats yet unseen. Adelaide emerged from Grover's office, her footfalls crisp, chin high. Luke rose, meaning to thank her. Foolish, maybe, but one hand Frank blocked the aisle. "Trouble walks behind pretty eyes," Frank warned, voice low. "Ride on, Callahan, before Dry Creek carves your name on a pine box." Luke pushed past. The Batwing doors slapped open just as Adelaide reached him, breath hitching. "They're forming committees," she whispered. "Tonight they'll vote to seize your land too." He forced a smile. "Let them. Dirt's just dirt." Adelaide shook her head, braids swaying like candlelight in storm wind. "My father doesn't think so." Sheriff Collins strode over, star flashing. "Enough chatter. Mount up." He handed Luke's holster, empty save a broken buckle. "Gun stays with me till you cross Gray Wash." Luke strapped it anyway. Empty leather still felt like honor. Adelaide's fingers brushed his sleeve. "Ride north till sundown," she said, voice trembling and fierce all at once. "Whatever you hear behind you, don't turn back." Before Luke could answer, Collins jerked him toward the hitch rail. Adelaide retreated, skirts whispering secrets into dust. 3 streets away, Silas Grover hammered the telegraph key, sweating over each click. To General Nathaniel Grant, Fort Yavapai, assault foiled by Luke Callahan. Town persecute hero, request immediate escort. Dawn, Adelaide. When the last spark left the wire, Grover swallowed the taste of gunmetal fear. Outside, distant to the south, a faint brown smear kissed the horizon. He'd seen cavalry dust before, rolling thunder clouds of iron judgment. And he knew, bone deep, that Dry Creek's clock had begun to tick backward toward its own undoing. Night fell like a smoked glass curtain over the chaparral, and Luke Callahan's solitary campfire flickered against the widening dark. 10 miles north of Dry Creek, he'd tethered his paint mare beside a dying mesquite and laid his bedroll among rocks still warm from daylight. The first coyote howl hadn't finished its echo before Luke's thoughts turned, unbidden, to Adelaide, her strange half-smile, her warning not to look back. He fed another twig to the flames and tried to pray, but ash-tainted wind mocked every syllable. Back in town, whispers moved faster than prairie fire. Silas Grover's tongue, loosened by guilt, spilled the telegram's secret to his wife. By the time the saloon lamps dimmed, every poker table knew Adelaide Grant was daughter to General Nathaniel Grant, the Iron Stallion of the Brazos, commander of 200 mounted rifles. Panic churned. Mayor Baxter ordered extra lanterns lit. Sheriff Collins doubled sentries. Reverend Whitaker rang the church bell at midnight, urging prayer but sounding as if tolling for their graves. At 2 a.m., a ranch hand named Otis Ragg stumbled into town, eyes wide as full moons. He'd ridden the southern ridgeline and seen dust, a low, rolling bank hugging the horizon like a storm front made of earth. No stars shone behind it. The air, he swore, tasted metallic, like spent cartridges. Collins dismissed him with a curse, but the story slithered through alleys, sprouting in terrified imaginations. 200 horsemen riding through the night, sabers catching moonlight. Boots weighted with judgment. Luke, unaware of the brewing dread, studied the constellation Scorpio, tracing its hooked tail with calloused finger. The mare lifted her head, ears pricking south. Luke heard it too, distant, faint, but steady. Hoofbeats multiplied. He stood, palm resting on the empty holster against his thigh. No gun, only leather, yet the feel steadied him. He doused the fire, letting darkness swallow the glow, and listened. The rhythm grew, like drums beneath the earth, then faded again as wind shifted. Perhaps just wild mustangs, he told himself. Yet his pulse marked its own cadence. Thunder, thunder, thunder. In Dry Creek, Chamberlain's Mercantile stayed open, townsfolk lining up for ammunition they swore was just for coyotes. Widow Loomis, white-lipped, packed heirloom silver into a carpetbag. Young Jed Thompson, the boy who'd hurled the stone, roamed the streets clutching a lantern, eyes glistening with the terrible clarity of regret. The clock atop City Hall chimed 3. Each peal rang like a nail tapping into timber. Mayor Baxter convened an emergency council inside the church. "We fetch Callahan at first light," he rasped, sweat gleaming on his cheeks. "Offer him land rights, a public apology, whatever it takes." No one mentioned that dawn might deliver something far less negotiable. In the pre-dawn hush, Luke slept fitfully, dreams full of pounding hooves and sun-bright steel. A sudden gust stirred campfire ashes into a spiral that glowed ember red before dying. He woke to find the eastern sky bruised violet, and in that fragile silence before birdsong, the ground seemed to tremble, an omen galloping ever nearer. Luke Callahan awoke to a trembling earth. At first he thought it was nightmare residue, hooves chasing him through labyrinths of dust, but the mare's startled whinny proved otherwise. He rolled up, grabbing the Winchester he'd used as a pillow, though it held no cartridges. On the far ridge, sunrise painted the sky copper, and against that molten light marched a dark, ordered silhouette. 200 cavalrymen, lances upright, sabers flashing like shards of the very sun. Luke's heart slammed once, twice. General Nathaniel Grant rode at their head, silver beard plaited neat, posture carved from iron. Even at distance, Luke recognized the man from dime novel engravings, the Iron Stallion who broke the Comanche, the tactician who never blinked. And Adelaide's warning rang through Luke's skull. Whatever you hear behind you, don't turn back. Too late. Judgment had overtaken him. In Dry Creek, church bells clanged frantic summons. Sheriff Collins stumbled from the jail half-dressed. Mayor Baxter wheezed like a steam pump. Townsfolk poured into the square, nightclothes flapping, eyes wide as lantern glass. The cavalry fanned across Main Street, each horse snorting ghost-white breath into cool dawn. Boots hit dirt in percussion. Thud, 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 40 rows deep. General Grant dismounted with glacier-slow certainty, letting silence coil around his presence. "Bring me my daughter," he said, low but every shingle heard. Adelaide stepped from the rectory doorway, serene as stained glass come to life. She touched her father's arm. He never took eyes from the crowd. "Who led the abuse?" Grant asked. Nobody answered. Even Reverend Whitaker's Bible seemed to tremble. "My scouts counted eggshells, stones, a noose." The general's voice stayed even, yet menace rippled beneath each syllable. "Captain Mercer, how many troopers to reduce this town to embers?" Mercer's gauntlet slapped a carbine. 20 to fire, 20 to salt, sir. Half an hour." A collective gasp fluttered like broken prayer. Old Widow Loomis's cane thunked as she collapsed to her knees. Sheriff Collins managed a rasp. "General, we were misled. The cowboy is gone, but you drove him," Grant cut in, steel edging out. "You will retrieve Luke Callahan before sunset. You will honor him publicly. Fail, and Dry Creek becomes a cinder between river and rail." He turned to Adelaide, voice softening a fraction. "Are you harmed, child?" "Unharmed," she said, "but his honor lies bleeding where they left it." Grant faced the assembly once more. "Your hourglass has flipped." Noon 3 ragged posses stormed north, dust boiling behind them. Sheriff Collins rode lead, hat clenched so tight his knuckles blanched. Jed Thompson, a boy yesterday, penitential today, clutched a water skin for Luke. Guilt spurred them faster than spurs ever could. Luke watched their approach from a scrub oak bluff, rifle across knees, finger resting on useless trigger. He considered running east into Mesquite Badlands. No posse could follow long, but the sight of Adelaide's ribbon still tied to his saddle horn anchored him. When Collins reined up 20 yards away, Luke saw desperation drizzle from every pore. "Callahan," the sheriff panted, "General Grant will burn us alive. Come back, and you'll have apology, land, whatever you name." Luke's brows knit. "Yesterday you had rope ready. Yesterday we were blind." Luke scanned faces. Jed's tear-swollen eyes. Collins's shaking hands. Mayor Baxter's sweat-slicked jowls. Fear had hacked arrogance close to humility, but not quite. Still, if he refused, Dry Creek might roast under saber and torch. He'd fought to save a single woman. Could he now condemn 100 children? He swung into the saddle. "I'll ride, but understand, my dignity is mine to price." Jed offered him the water skin. Luke drank, tasting the salt of another man's regret. Dusk, as the posse crested the southern hill, torchlight blossomed below, lines of flames marking Main Street like a corridor to judgment. Between those flickering walls waited 200 cavalrymen at perfect rest, saddles creaking, rifles angled skyward. At the far end, the church steeple speared an indigo sky, its bell silent now, saving voice for whatever came next. Luke's mare sidestepped, sensing the storm inside its rider. He patted her neck, inhaled smoke-tinged twilight, and nudged forward. The posse fell behind, leaving him alone between burning rows, hoofbeats echoing off clapboard facades. Halfway down the corridor, Luke halted. Far ahead, he could see General Grant's silhouette, immovable granite. Beside him, Adelaide, braid catching torch gleam, locket bright as a newborn star. Luke exhaled. Time to measure the worth of mercy, he thought, then clicked his tongue and rode into the molten throat of Dry Creek's reckoning. Luke Callahan dismounted in the exact patch of dirt where rotten eggs had splattered him the day before. Torches guttered along Main Street, their smoke spiraling into a cobalt sky pricked with first stars. 200 cavalrymen stood motionless behind General Nathaniel Grant, a living wall of steel and midnight black horses. The crowd of Dry Creek gathered opposite, faces lantern pale, eyes shimmering with dread. Luke could feel every heartbeat in that silence, like distant hoofbeats trapped inside his chest. Adelaide Grant stepped forward first. Torchlight gilded her braid. The blue dress had been exchanged for riding leathers, as though she no longer intended to play porcelain. She opened the locket at her throat. Inside lay the tiny telegram, now folded into a heart. She said nothing, only held Luke's gaze, and in that gaze lived 1,000 unspoken vows. General Grant addressed the town without lifting his voice. Yesterday your wrath landed on the wrong man. Today your salvation rides at his side. He turned to Luke, saluting with 2 fingers to the brim of his campaign hat. Mr. Callahan, Dry Creek owes you reparations. Name them. Luke's throat tightened. He swept his eyes across the townsfolk. Widow Loomis leaning on her cane, weeping. Mayor Baxter trembling like a felled steer. Jed Thompson clutching his hat to his chest. One by one, they stepped forward. Mayor Baxter went first, voice quavering. Luke, I misjudged you. Forgive my blindness. He produced Luke's Colt revolver, freshly oiled, butt facing forward. Next came Sheriff Collins, badge unpinned and offered like a surrendered blade. If this star means anything, it belongs on a chest braver than mine. Widow Loomis pressed a bundle of hand-stitched linens into Luke's arms. A wedding gift, she whispered through tears, for the day you choose, should you ever choose. Luke accepted each gesture, but his silence grew heavier than iron. He remembered the sick crack of his knuckles against drifter skulls, the taste of egg yolk, the feel of stones. He remembered Adelaide's whisper, whatever you hear behind you, don't turn back. He had turned, and because he turned, the town still stood. That felt like enough penance for all of them. He faced General Grant. Sir, I want no land, no title. What I want is a promise. His voice carried to every rooftop. This town will judge by action, not by rumor. Whoever seeks refuge here will find justice. Same measure for ranch hand or banker. He looked at Reverend Whitaker. Can Dry Creek keep that promise? Reverend Whitaker set his Bible on the dirt and knelt. By God's own light, we will. Luke returned the Colt to his holster, buckling the strap with a final snap that echoed like a closing ledger. Then my debt is settled, and so is yours. Relief broke over the crowd. Gasp, sob, whispered prayer. Torches lowered as though their bearers feared to outshine mercy. Behind Luke, Captain Mercer barked a single order. The cavalrymen pivoted in perfect unison, rifles shouldered, sabers sheathed. No fire would claim Dry Creek tonight. General Grant clasped Luke's shoulder. Ride with my regiment, he offered. Lead men who know what honor costs. Luke glanced at Adelaide. In her eyes, he saw not a life of campaigns, but one of rebuilding. Soil under fingernails, laughter in open doorways. I thank you, General, Luke said, but I reckon my fight's here, teaching this town how to stand tall without a saber at its throat. A murmur of agreement rippled. Sheriff Collins pressed the tin star into Luke's palm. We'll need a new lawman, he said, one who's proven steel without shooting iron. Luke pinned the badge to his vest. The metal felt oddly light. "First decree," he declared. "No one rides alone after dark. Vigilance is our shared duty." Adelaide approached, voice soft yet clear. "Second decree. Dry Creek hosts a wedding come spring." She took Luke's calloused hand. Her smile outshone every torch. Cheers erupted, strong and genuine, carrying up into starlight like hymn notes freed from pews. General Grant mounted, giving a final nod. "Then Dry Creek has learned to guard its treasure." He wheeled his stallion. 200 horsemen followed, their departure thunder rolling west until desert swallowed the sound. As hoofbeats faded, Luke inhaled the night air, no longer tinged with smoke, only with juniper and possibility. In the square where hatred once foamed, children chased flickering embers, adults exchanged cautious laughter, and a cowboy newly minted sheriff unlocked the future with the simplest key. Mercy given freely, like water at a desert well, enough for any soul willing to kneel and drink.